Talking to someone from the 1990s feels different. It's a nervous system calibrated in a world that moved slowly enough to feel solid. Picture a conversation with someone who grew up in the 1990s. There's a certain quiet that settles in. The pauses between words feel comfortable, like a soft space where you can breathe. It's not just politeness or shyness. It's a kind of listening that feels anchored, as if their attention can hold still for a while without rushing to fill the silence. Alex, born in 1988, has a habit. When you finish speaking, he waits a moment before answering. Not because he's distracted, but because he's actually thinking about what you said. This isn't rare among his friends from that era. Their way of being present comes from a time when distractions didn't buzz in every pocket, and when missing out on a moment meant you just had to wait for the next one. Scientists have noticed this difference too. Tests that measure how long someone can focus, like the continuous performance test, show that people born before 1995 tend to catch more details and make fewer mistakes. Their attention, shaped in the pause and quiet of the 1990s, is a bit like a steady flashlight in a world of strobe lights. This isn't about being better or worse. It's about how the world moved around them and how that rhythm settled into their bones. Children born between 1985 and 1995 grew up on a swinging bridge between two worlds. Their early days were shaped by cassette tapes, landline phones, and afternoons that stretched out with nothing but time. By the time they reached middle school, the world had changed its mind. In 1995, only about 14% of American adults had ever used the internet. 10 years later, that number had climbed to 67%. For kids like Alex, this meant one night you were rewinding a VHS tape, and the next you were listening to the whir of a dial-up modem, hoping no one picked up the phone and broke the connection. Alex remembers the first time his family went online. The modem screeched, the screen flickered, and suddenly he was sending messages to a kid named Brian 3 towns over. It felt like magic, but it was slow magic. Pages loaded line by line, and every click was a small act of patience. This wasn't just about new gadgets, it was about learning to move between two different kinds of time: the slow, steady rhythm of the analog world and the fast, buzzing pulse of the digital one. People who grew up in this window became translators, able to speak both languages, comfortable with silence, but also ready for the next notification. That is why they are often called a bridge generation, not the first to cross into the digital age, but the ones who remember what it felt like before the crossing. Before everyone carried a camera in their pocket, most moments lived only in memory. For kids like Alex, growing up meant being mostly invisible to the outside world. There were family photos and maybe a birthday party caught on a VHS tape. But the ordinary days, building a pillow fort, talking to the dog, staring at clouds, were private. No one was watching, and nothing was being saved for later. When Alex thinks back, he remembers the heavy click of the camcorder only coming out for special occasions, not for every small win or silly mistake. A UNICEF Gallup survey found that about 7 out of 10 adults who grew up in the 1990s feel their childhood was far less recorded than today's. This sense of privacy gave them room to try things, mess up, and start over without worrying about being seen. Even though most families owned a camcorder, only about a quarter used it regularly. Most childhoods played out unrecorded, leaving memories to grow roots inside, not online. For Alex and many of his friends, this invisibility shaped the way they built their sense of self. They learned to tell stories to themselves, not to an audience. Their identities grew quietly, anchored in the feeling that the world wasn't always looking in. That privacy, rare now, became an inner foundation, one that would help them weather the noisy, always-on world that was waiting just around the corner. Long before every toy came with a screen, afternoons could stretch out like a blank page. For kids like Alex, boredom wasn't a problem to solve, it was the start of something. He remembers sitting in the backyard, a stick in one hand and a plastic bucket in the other, inventing a game with rules that changed every 5 minutes. There were no instructions, no timer, and no one watching to tell him if he was doing it right or wrong. The only limit was how long he could keep his own mind interested. Scientists looking at what happens in these slow, unplanned hours have found a gentle kind of magic. When children spend time bored, their brains get busy in the background. A big review of 27 studies found that the more often kids had to make their own fun, the more creative they became as adults. The link is not just a hunch, it is measured with a positive correlation of about R equals 0.31 between bored play and creativity scores later on. For the bridge generation, boredom was a quiet teacher. It nudged them to build, draw, or daydream, not because someone told them to, but because there was nothing else to do. In those moments, patience took root. The mind learned to wait, to wonder, and to turn empty time into stories and ideas. That is the first secret skill of growing up in the 90s. Learning that when nothing happens, something inside you wakes up. Waiting was part of daily life for anyone who grew up in the 1990s. There were lines at the video store, commercials during your favorite shows, and long afternoons counting down to dinner. Small moments stretched out asking for patience. For kids like Alex, waiting wasn't just about passing time. It was about learning to trust that good things would come eventually, if you could hold on a little longer. Researchers have tried to measure this invisible skill. In a modern version of the marshmallow test, children born in the early 2000s waited about 2 minutes less for a treat than those born around 1990. That's a lot if you think about it as the difference between grabbing the first marshmallow or holding out for the second. For the bridge generation, those extra minutes were everywhere, waiting for a song to come on the radio, for a parent to pick you up, or for a birthday to finally arrive. Alex still remembers saving up for his first CD. He would put $1 in a jar every week, counting and recounting the bills, imagining the music. The CD sat on his shelf for weeks before he even opened it, just because the waiting had become part of the prize. When you practice patience every day, it settles into your bones. It is not just about self-control, it is about believing that some things are worth the wait, and that you can handle a little longing without giving up. That quiet confidence, built one wait at a time, became a second inner skill for the 1990s generation. Alex walks through his neighborhood on a Saturday morning, hands in his pockets, no headphones, just the sound of his own footsteps and birds. In these moments, his mind wanders, sometimes replaying old memories, sometimes inventing stories out of passing clouds. This quiet is more than just a break from noise. It is a space his brain knows well, built from years of afternoons with nothing but time. But when his phone pings with a message from work, something inside him shifts. Without missing a beat, he types a quick, sharp reply, faster than his younger co-workers, who grew up always online, might expect. Scientists studying brains like Alex's have found something interesting. The part of the brain that helps with daydreaming, self-reflection, and patience. The default mode, network, DMN, is about 15% stronger in people who spent their childhoods in quieter, less busy worlds. This network acts like a gentle engine, idling in the background, ready for deep thought or sudden action. It lets someone like Alex switch between long, silent walks and rapid-fire digital conversations without losing his balance. This is not about being better at one thing or another. It is more like being fluent in 2 languages, the slow, spacious language of waiting, and the quick clipped rhythm of instant replies. People who grew up in the 1990s learned to move between these speeds, carrying both the calm of analog days and the rush of digital nights inside their minds. That ability is rare, a kind of quiet superpower that holds steady even as the world keeps getting louder. Alex sits at his desk, eyes a little heavier than they used to be. He's good at switching between deep focus and fast replies, but lately the effort leaves him tired in a way that is hard to explain. He is not alone. Across people who grew up in the 1990s, reports of burnout have climbed by nearly half since 2015. It's not just about long hours or too many tasks. It's the quiet cost of always having to adapt, holding on to the slow patience of their childhood while answering every buzz and ping of the modern world. Alex admits sometimes he wishes for a pause button he can actually press. Alex's story doesn't stop at quiet patience or fast replies. The bridge generation often carries a kind of emotional gravity, a sense of being older than their years, shaped by watching the world change so quickly. In their work lives, this shows up in surprising ways. About 31% of millennials, including Alex, have moved into creative, problem-solving jobs like UX design or content strategy. That's much higher than the 19% seen in Gen Z. Alex uses those old analog skills, fixing things, listening deeply, and waiting for the right moment, to design digital tools that feel natural and human. It is as if growing up between two worlds gave him a longer view, a steady hand, and a way of working that holds both patience and speed at once. Today, nearly 7 out of 10 adults who grew up in the 90s remember what it felt like to wait, to wonder, to be unrecorded. That timing shaped a generation fluent in both quiet and speed, not better, just between. Their rhythm still bridges worlds that rarely pause to listen. Thanks for watching.